China just pulled off the impossible. While Trump celebrates his tariff victory, Beijing's trade surplus hit a record $1.2 trillion. But here's the twist. The real collapse isn't happening in China. It's happening right here in America. And silver? It just became the most dangerous commodity on earth. So here's the report card for the tariffs in 2025. Now, Trump believes he turned the U.S. into an A++++ economy. But is that really the situation? Now, a big part of the tariff war is to force industries to move to America while crashing out China's exports and, by extension, its economy. However, the real collapse is happening in the United States itself. If not for all those ridiculous AI tech investments and a bubble, we would be in recession today. The tariff war is demolishing hard industries in the country. In 2025, growth in the U.S. was concentrated in just 4 main industries: healthcare, real estate, government, and technology. This won't be helpful for turning the U.S. into an export-based economy. The only things still being sold are AI chips. Construction and manufacturing are collapsing. And when you raise tariffs on key inputs, you can't possibly make affordable goods anymore. U.S. suppliers themselves, they have to jack prices up and add their own margins. Now, the entire of last year was a grand experiment. Can we weaponize the U.S. consumer market and cut away Chinese imports? U.S. consumers will absorb the pain, but at least China's economy will be hurt. Plus, our allies and trading partners will shift their factories here. So the U.S. economy will be completely decoupled from China. But the latest data just destroys that line of reasoning. Now, China's 2025 trade surplus just hit a record $1.2 trillion. It was a blockbuster year for the Chinese. Overall exports rose by 6.6% in December. Exports to non-U.S. regions grew. Europe is buying more. Asia is buying more. But the growth to Africa is insane. A 26% growth. Beijing is getting to where the punk is going to be. And this is during a period when the exports to the U.S. dropped by 30%. The decoupling is real. China has demonstrated that their export economy can survive and thrive without the United States. The more China exports to the world, the more impossible it is for Trump or any future U.S. president to sanction them. The world depends on Chinese goods to bring down cost. China exports deflation. And the trend going forward in 2026 will be more of the same. There's a reason why countries from France and Canada are running to China. But Krohn and Carney understands the potential of Chinese markets. They, of course, need exports like rare earths, Chinese technology, and more importantly, they need a Chinese consumer as well. Now, China's e-commerce market dwarfs the U.S. 40% of global sales is centered around China. And last year, this would have reached $3.4 trillion, almost triple that of the U.S. And that's why many Western companies still wants to sell into the Chinese market. It's not just about barrels of oil or jet planes. Chinese demand for online shopping, consumer goods, is a sign for bigger imports potential. And at the same time, the U.S. is importing less from the world. So the leverage has swung to the Chinese. Now, of course, this revelation is freaking Trump out. He's going all out to defend his tariff war. And his latest statements are just so bizarre. Now suddenly tariffs are working, and if you don't like it, you are pro-China. But it was in 1929, because a lot of people, the anti-tariff people. Now, an anti-tariff person is a pro-Chinese person like Coke. The evidence shows overwhelmingly that the tariffs are not paid by American consumers, that they're paid by foreign nations and middlemen. And Scott went over that with us before, and they're paid by middlemen. They raise the thing. Countries get involved, they pay them because otherwise they won't have companies. They won't be viable, and we're the big beneficiary. Once again, the so-called experts were 100% wrong, and Trump was right. So why is Trump hopping mad? It's because he can't U-turn his tariff war without everyone laughing at him. But the longer this continues, China's advantage is only going to grow. Now, China's strategy has always been about investing more and consuming less. They buy up global supply chains, and they build factories around the world where production is more affordable. Now, this might come as a surprise to many, but the cost of labor in China is no longer that cheap. The trade war is just helping China wrestle control of global production even further. Now, China's trade surplus was always going to grow. The pandemic exposed how reliant the world was on Chinese factories. And since 2020, Chinese exports have been on a tear. But the 2025 tariff war just changed everything. Not only did China export more to the world, they bought far less goods from the U.S. Their trade surplus is growing like never before. We can expect this to hit 1.4 or even 1.5 trillion this year. Chinese companies, they are being forced up the value chain. They have to invest. They have to innovate or they get left behind. And because so many exporters are state-owned companies, Beijing can direct these earnings to strategic investments. Now, the trade war is simply bizarre. Trump is taxing U.S. consumers for revenue. He's hammering down on U.S. manufacturing. He is also antagonizing every country on planet Earth, including my favorite, Penguin Island. But the big winner is the Chinese, and really make it make sense. Now, China's Chinese companies, private and government controlled, they have a ton of money to deploy globally, and where are the Chinese investing in? They are pouring more money into basic materials, metals, and minerals. In other words, China is still consolidating global supply chains, investing into mines and refineries even in 2025. From lithium mines to big gold projects, the building blocks of the modern economy, they are turning Chinese. They are also making huge energy investments around the world, building power plants, oil refineries, and solar installations. The big investments, they spread across Africa and Asia. Now, one can already surmise China's future strategy. As they move up the value chain, certain Chinese industries will be priced out domestically, and they'll simply move to these friendly locations, these jurisdictions. There's already a big Chinese footprint and ecosystem they have built over the years and over the decades. Meanwhile, the US just tripped themselves up again. And this time is the chip war we have to discuss. This is just so silly at this point. We have to cover it. Now, Trump is trying to dip his hands on all aspects of the private economy, even within the US itself, and this makes things even less efficient and less effective. The US has set a 25% export tariff on NVIDIA chip sales to China. Now, export tariff means NVIDIA has to pay 25% of their Chinese sales revenue to the Trump administration. For every $10 earned, $2.50 goes to the government. And where's that money going to end up? A big part will probably go to expanding the US military. And that's how bizarre the whole situation is. NVIDIA and other chip companies are selling to China for a reason. They need the money for R&D to innovate and create more advanced lines of chips like the Blackwell and Rubin series. And if revenue keeps getting transferred to the Trump team, it's self-defeating, is it not? Meanwhile, China will be doubling down on their own investments. Not only will they let Chinese companies keep all the revenue, they are throwing a ton of subsidies on them as well. The US wants to bring Taiwan chip factories back to the US, but this move will backfire badly. Litton Extreme will go up in flames. There's two commitments from Taiwan. There's $250 billion that comes directly from companies, and then there's $250 billion supplied by the government to help their smaller and medium-sized companies all and bring that whole supply chain to America. So we're going to bring it all over so we become self-sufficient in the capacity of building semiconductors. This is exactly what Donald Trump said he was going to do, and he is doing it today. $250 billion and $250 billion. This is the kind of scale that Donald Trump operates in. Now, the plan to shift Taiwanese production sounds cool. So, now NVIDIA, they were going to have a dedicated pipeline of chips domestically without shipping it from Asia. But it still doesn't solve the problem of demand. Sooner or later, domestic US chip sales, they're going to stall. NVIDIA and other companies, they have to look elsewhere to sell. And like it or not, that somewhere else is China. That's half of the entire semiconductor market. The chips made in the US are already going to cost much more. Extracting revenue is going to stall progress. It actually helped Chinese street makers like Huawei close the innovation gap over time, but maybe they don't even need to do this. We have reports of Beijing telling customs not to allow NVIDIA chips into the country. We are still in a state of limbo if China really wants to buy the chips or not. And honestly, Trump is just complicating everything now. If I were the US, I would just allow unrestricted access to China now before it's too late. Drop the export tariff and allow Chinese revenue to flow unimpeded into NVIDIA, because if they don't, China will just speed on ahead. They will close the gap faster than we all think. Now, since 2020, China has been hot on the heels with the US. Chinese hardware is just a couple of steps away from US chips in terms of performance, but that doesn't mean their AI models are underpowered. Cost efficiency is still a thing. Huawei's Ascent chips might be 3 times weaker than NVIDIA's lineup, but the cost is also 3 times cheaper, maybe even more. Chinese companies will just play the numbers game and focus on quantity until their quality catches up. Now, for our last topic, we need to talk about silver today. Just recently, we have seen enormous volatility in a silver market. Now, the price has gone down by 5 to 10% in just a matter of days. It feels like Bitcoin or a tech stock because the stakes are just so enormous. China and the US, they are fighting for global silver supply. Both sides need the metal for the future of technology and industry. Now, there's a reason why silver prices in Shanghai are 13 higher than the rest of the world. At its peak, if you want to buy silver in China, you'll have to pay a record $15 an ounce. This is crazy because all silver investors know there's always a physical premium on top of that. So to buy the physical metal in China itself, you'll probably be paying $120 an ounce easily. Chinese investors and industrial companies, they are rushing for silver today because tomorrow is not guaranteed. If the world is moving towards renewable power and EVs, the demand for silver is going to explode even further. China is the biggest manufacturer of solar panels, and their companies are freaking out. The need to secure a silver supply is setting prices to the moon because there are very few ways to substitute it. Just 4 years back, silver was only 3% of total cost in a solar panel. Even the aluminum accounted for more when making solar PVs, but things have obviously changed the day. Silver now accounts for a quarter of total cost. As a manufacturer, you are in a bind. You can't just swap silver and use copper directly. There are serious durability and lifespan issues. Efficiency is also a problem. So we are many years away from any serious substitution. You have to lock in silver prices now. So you buy more, and it causes premiums to fly up in China. And now a flood of silver is moving from the west to the east. Traders are all shipping their silver to China because a 15 margin on a $90 base price is insane. It's an enormous arbitrage. So no matter how you transport the silver, whether it's through a ship, a plane, a submarine, or a teleportation device, you're going to make money. The biggest admission of the silver war itself is Trump. He just held back on the tariffs targeting critical minerals, including silver. Now, the original plan was to impose 20 to 30% tariffs on silver imports. But Washington realizes they can't do that even without the tariffs. Imports of silver to the US are already flying up. Major buying has been happening since 2025. And if you impose a tariff on silver, prices where raw will soar in the US. Importers and companies like Tesla, they will still have to buy the silver. The biggest losers will be American investors, and stackers and consumers of silver will also suffer and crush the entire renewable sector. Now, economic policy is so volatile that we have no idea what's going to happen next week. For all we know, hell will break loose tomorrow. So investors and importers will still want some silver. The buying is not going to stop. The volatility for silver is going to continue. And if you're in the markets, really mentally prepare. Fortify yourself, fortify your heart, prepare for wild swings of 5% daily. Everyone is unsure, guys. Even I'm unsure. However, what's certain is that the US-China civil war is not going to stop. It's probably going to get more intense. But let me know what you think. Will Trump ever backtrack on the tariffs? And can the US ever tariff silver imports? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through this insane times.